Okay. It looks like we're live. It always
All
sneaks
right.
up on me. All right, everyone. Welcome to another live stream sponsored by the Christian Comic Art Society. My name is Joffrey Strout, and today we are joined by comic book artist Matt Baker. Among other things, we'll be talking to him about his book, Samson Rise. Welcome, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks heaps for having me.
And we may be joined here momentarily as we go by my co-host, Louis Serrano. We're running a little bit behind, so he might be joining in any minute now. So
cool.
Also, those of you in the audience, want to invite you guys to join the conversation. You can leave your responses and or questions in the comments, and we'll do our best to see those and include the ones we can in our conversation as we go. So
sounds good.
All right, so let's get started. So the work that I know that you've done, we can talk about anything you're interested in. The one that I've run into is the Samson Rise book, and we've talked a little bit about that. So why don't you describe that to us? What is it? You know, how did you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, all right. Well, the long version is that last year, I think it must have been March. I just happened to be talking to my friend Daryl, who is the co-creator of the comic, and just asking how things were going, and talking about we just entered the COVID lockdown in Australia, and so we were kind of looking for something to do, and we'd always talked about doing a comic together, and we'd kind of dabbled in it over the years because we worked together at Disney back in the day. And so we'd kind of done a 4-page comic, was probably the longest one we'd done. And Daryl was just throwing out ideas and said, how would you feel about doing a comic on Samson? And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. And we kind of didn't want to overwhelm each other. So we kind of just decided we were going to do an 8-page comic just for fun, just to see what happened. No big plans for it. And so we just kind of threw ourselves into it. And pretty soon we went, 8 pages isn't going to be enough to tell anything decent. So we expanded it to 12 pages and just went, let's make this like a 12-page mini comic. And while we were sort of doing that, I just started going, oh, this is looking pretty cool. I'm going to brag it up a bit on the socials. So I started throwing some images up on the Christian comics community, and people started, sort of liking it, and got some interest. And next thing you know, people were asking what we were going to do with it. And I kind of felt a bit stupid because we didn't actually have a plan. But then we kind of realized that we were onto something, and so we went, all right, let's actually expand it. And so then it bumped up to 16 pages. And then by that time, Daniel Hancock from Terminus Media reached out to us. He was one of the people that were curious as to how we were going to publish this. And so we signed on with Terminus to publish it, and and Daniel came on as editor, and also did a lot of script assist, sort of just finding the kinks in our script and ironing them out, which was great. And then we realized that we needed to expand it just a few more pages. So it ended up being a 20-page comic instead of 8. And it only took us a year. So because it was Daryl and I pretty much doing everything. So yeah.
So you were so how did you're collaborating? So it doesn't sound like you're distinctly one of you doing like writing, one of you doing drawing. It sounds like you're kind of sharing hats. Like how did you divide up the labor there?
Yeah, it was very much back and forth and quite piecemeal sometimes. We definitely didn't stick to the normal flow of, someone writes the script, someone lays it out and does the pencils, etc. It was more generally Daryl would draw the layouts and the pencils for most of the pages. We both co-wrote the script, and we were quite often, fixing each other's dialogue and things like that. So it was very, very much each of us, and he would generally send me the pencils, and then I would tighten that up and ink it, and then he would color flat it, and then I'd add lighting and effects and lettering on top of that.
Cool.
But there was some pages where we just realized it'd be better for me to pencil those pages, like the market scene where Delilah first shows up. For those who have seen the comic, actually I've got it here, I'll show you. So like this sort of scene, I'm gonna dob Daryl in here. So that's Delilah sort of showing up in the marketplace for the first time.
Oh yeah, okay.
And Daryl doesn't like drawing backgrounds. so
Yeah, me too, right?
Right.
I'm with him, right?
To be honest, I'm not the best at it either, but I think I was more willing than Daz. So I was like, yeah, I'll do the pages that are more background heavy. So I penciled that page. And sometimes he'd be fixing my panels, and sometimes I'd be fixing his panels. So yeah, it was very much a back and forth process, and it's interesting because I think what you end up with at the end is kind of a style that is not 100% Daryl's style and not 100% my style. It's a style that is very much both of us, and neither of us would achieve on our own. So it was very cool to end up with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because there's usually such a distinction between just, oh, you're doing all the art and you're doing the writing, and it's fun to see the things that are different when you have different people like putting all the artistic talents, putting them together.
For sure.
Well, so for those who haven't run into your work or into this book before, I saw, I've been trying to get a hold of a copy, but apparently there have been some technical issues. So I saw so the title said basically this is not your Sunday school version or something like that.
Yeah.
So how would you say what's distinct? Like if you're going to say how this story, this comic is distinct from some other versions of Samson that have been done, what do you think sticks out to you as being unique about this approach?
Yeah, well, I guess when we first started talking about it, we didn't want to water it down too much. I think sometimes when things get watered down, you're almost insulting your audience if you dumb it down too much. And we were like, most people are familiar with the Sunday school version, which understandably is quite watered down. And you don't want to freak out the kids too much. So, well, if I remember this correctly, Daryl wanted to go quite almost R-rated with it, like just go no holds barred, and I was kind of like, that's not really me. I think if I'm involved, we're gonna have to at least make it M-rated, and so we kind of compromised a bit. And but that being said, so we don't have blood and guts flying everywhere, and nothing's too violent or over the top. But we at the same time, we didn't want to sort of paint Samson as being any better than he was. We wanted to be more realistic and true to the story, I suppose, and show his flaws for what they were. Yeah. Show that he, even though he's imbued with this superhuman strength from God, he was still very much flawed, as we all are, and so it was a good to try and find how we would tell that story in a creative way. And so I think it was Daryl's idea actually to do the flashbacks. And as soon as he suggested that, I was like, yeah, that's got to be the way to do it. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So how's the reception been? Like, what have you, like, now that you're done, it's a thing, it's in the world. Like the next step is kind of, I think sort of nerve-wracking part for an artist. Like, you put it out into the world and wonder how people are going to respond to it. What have you been hearing back? How have people responded?
Yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive, actually, which is great. Some people have said, this is going to sound like it's bragging now, but some people have said it's probably the best one they've seen so far as the retelling of the Samson story, which is very cool. And a lot of people have really gravitated towards the art. Like Daryl and I, we both know that we're not really writers, so we just had to go at it. Did our best, and luckily Daniel Hancock was helping us out with that in the end. But we know that our strength is more in our visual storytelling, our sequential art, and we're okay at telling a story visually with our artwork. So we played on those strengths, and especially Daryl with he's so good at dynamic poses and laying out a page, with his paneling in a really dynamic and creative way. And so we were playing on those strengths, and I think that paid off. I think, we had comments from people saying that they really loved how dynamic and engaging some of the art was. And so I guess that works because we're talking about comic books here, and you can't really tell a story in comics without having interesting art. So yeah, I feel like that was a good reception, and now I guess we're just sort of trying to get it in more people's faces. A lot of people still don't know that it's out there, that they don't know what we've done, and I guess we just like to give as many people an opportunity to see it as possible.
Yeah. So we'll probably do this again, but right now, if someone were looking for it, where would you direct them to find it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the easiest place is the Terminus Media website. So you just type in terminusmedia.com and it'll show up along with their other publications. So they've got some great comic books out. I think the best known one at the moment is the Dominion comic book series, which I think you're familiar with.
Yeah, we're actually going to have Baron Bell, that's his book. He's going to come on next week. At least Lord willing, we'll have him on next week, and we'll have a conversation about the Dominion book as well. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Yeah, that was one of the things that actually attracted us to Terminus as a publisher. When they approached us, we of course checked them out, looked at the website, and we're just super impressed with the Dominion comic series. Because just like mainstream, you get comics, some that are great and some that are not so great, and I guess it's up to your own personal taste too. But as soon as I saw the Dominion stuff, I was just really impressed with the storytelling and the new take on sort of the story of Saul and David, and the artwork, the quality of the artwork, and so I just kind of went, well, if this is what Terminus are publishing, then I think I'd like to be on board.
Yeah. So good by association, right? It only makes it you guys make each other look good.
That's it. Well, yeah. Well, sometimes I feel like I'm standing next to these guys and their stuff looks so good that I'm not sure mine looks so good anymore. But
no, yours
doesn't go that way.
Yours stuff looks really good. It's very strong. I'm not surprised people are really liking it, because it's really nice work.
Oh, cheers.
Well, how do you let's wait. We have a question here. Hold on a second. Now I know you guys aren't, like you said, you're not writers by trade, but someone was one of our commenters is asking if you have a favorite writing software. Do you guys write in anything in particular, or?
It's a good question. I actually don't have a favorite writing software. I just find it pretty easy to just set up a document in InDesign. So I quite often write in there or just in a Google Doc. But it is actually something that I'd like to look into, because if I keep pursuing writing projects, then I wouldn't mind having some software that would really help me out. But I find InDesign's been pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
So another question is, so now that you didn't expect this one to be as long as it was, but but now that it's finished and it's out there, do you have any other projects that you're looking to work on next?
Sort of. There's possibilities, and we haven't really, either Daryl or myself haven't really signed on to anything 100% yet. But I probably shouldn't say too much, because I feel like if you're going to have Baron on next week, I don't want to steal any of his thunder.
Okay.
But Terminus has some things in the work that we might be able to get on board with in the near future. So related to the Dominion stuff. So
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Ask Baron next week if he wants to divulge any information about that.
Disclose. Okay. Yeah. We'll let him say the news, I guess.
Yeah. Good. I don't want to feel like I'm,
speaking out of turn.
Cat's out of the bag. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, hey, so let's back up a little bit. I'm curious, like, about your artist journey. Like, how did you, like, your origin story? How did you get into the art world, and tell us about your background.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess like most of us, I'm sure you'll relate to stuff like this, but just as a kid, loved watching animated cartoons on a Saturday morning. Loved the Disney stuff, the Chip and Dale, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck stuff, and the movies, and also just liked reading the comics. Like I'd read the Disney comics as well, and some other comics that I'd found at the library, and kind of from an early age really gravitated towards comic book and cartoon art, and then started buying my own comic books when I got pocket money, and really got into the Marvel stuff. Loved that stuff, and just probably decided roundabout when I was in early high school that I definitely wanted to either be a comic book artist or an animator when I left school. And then didn't really do much about that apart from just drew all the time. That was just my jam, and it was probably fortunate that I enjoy spending a lot of time by myself, because I'd quite often just zone out and just be drawing and just be engulfed in that, and really loved it. And so in Australia, if you do art in high school, as your final year of high school, you have to do a major art project, and so I ended up making up my own comic book. I drew a 20-page comic book, and based it on a fairy tale that I kind of lampooned, and just about killed myself doing it, because I had no idea before I did it, like, how hard it is to actually write and draw and ink your own comic all by yourself. So it was actually a good learning curve. And I was so tired the night that I was finishing this. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning on the day that I had to hand in my major work. So because I hadn't timed it well.
Right.
And but I was working on it almost every day of the year. Like, I was into it. And I was so tired that the night that I was finishing it off, that the very last panel of the comic, I drew 6 fingers on the guy in the last panel, because I just had no idea what I was doing at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I just handed it in, and the last guy in the last panel's got 6 fingers. So that was kind of a taste, and then I kind of realized how much work was involved. And when I finished school, I didn't really do anything about becoming a comic book artist, but I decided to go do an arts degree at university. So I did 1 semester of that and hated it. and dropped out after a semester, because I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't grown up. I just wanted to draw, and I didn't want to do any of the theory work that was involved. I didn't want to I guess, read about the lives of artists that I had no interest in and things like that. So I just had a lot of growing up to do. And so I dropped out, and then I kind of just bummed around for a few years, working at Subway, probably mispronouncing jalapenos, and and then I got a bit of work designing signs at a local sign maker. So I did that for a few years and was just kind of drifting career-wise and not really knowing what to do next. And finally got to a point where I went, I've got to do something. I'm wasting my life. And so I was on the verge of actually just sending off drawings to different comic book companies. And before I actually did that, a friend of mine just out of the blue rang me up. We probably hadn't spoken for a couple of years. And he said, "What are you doing with your life?" And I said, "Not much." And he said, "Did you know that there's a Disney studio in Sydney and they're hiring at the moment?" And I went, "No, that's awesome. I didn't even know there was a Disney in Sydney." So I sent them off some drawings, and they sent me a test, and I sent the test back, and then they got me into the studio to do another test. And I got a job doing a 6-month traineeship at the studio. Oh. And that's how Daryl and I met, because he got into the same traineeship. And so the rest was history. We were working together for 5.5 years at Disney. We worked on nine movies in that 5.5 years. We were both, we started off as in-betweeners, and then cleanup artists. And so after that, unfortunately, Disney sort of shifted things around, as they tend to do from time to time. And so they closed down the Sydney studio, which is upsetting to us at the time. But I kind of made the decision, because I was married by that time, and neither of us really wanted to live in the big city. So I'd actually been living in a city 2.5 hours north, called Newcastle. And I'd been traveling by train every day down to Sydney and back. So I was spending 5 hours a day on the train, just commuting to work. And I was pretty sick of that after a couple of years of doing that. Yeah. So I was kind of happy for a change in a way, and I made the decision to just try my hand as a freelance illustrator, just so I could stay in Newcastle, basically. And so for better or for worse, I've been a freelance illustrator for the last 15 years.
Wow. Lord, that's great. And
that's the long version.
That's great. Well, it's encouraging to hear the ins and outs. Like it's often surprising to me, like the journeys that God seems to lead people on to get to where they are. Right.
Yeah. It was definitely, I 100% believe that it was a God thing, that my friend just saw this ad in the paper from Disney and straight away thought of his old mate Matt and gave me a ring. And I was just like, that's 100% God just going, get yourself off your butt, Matt, and go get a job. And ended up being a dream job. So
that's amazing. Praise the Lord. I'm curious if you ran into any challenges. Like a lot of times we'll talk about the high points and everything, that we've been through. That's, this is encouraging and this is encouraging.
Sure.
But I think sometimes we learn more by, when we find out like the challenges that we've run into and overcome. So I'm curious if there's anything that in your artistic journey that you feel like you've hit and overcome and might be able to give as an encouragement to others who are, trying to tackle the same sorts of things.
Great question. I might ask you the same thing in a minute.
I don't want to
definitely. Sorry.
I don't want to stump you. We can come back to it if you want.
No, I can speak to that. I think one of the biggest challenges has been just consistent work, and just learning the business of being a freelancer was difficult. And I went into it very naively and just had to learn the hard way. And so by learning the hard way, I mean that I've done things like agreed to projects before even learning how much they're going to pay me, and just things like that, and then being disappointed on the other side. I think the very first freelance job I got, without naming any names or anything like that, the guy just said, yeah, I want you to do a comic for me. And I was like, sweet. And then I checked with one of his friends, and his friends said, yeah, no, he'll look after you, he'll pay you well. And after that, we didn't talk about money. And then I finished the project for him, and I said, oh, your friend said that you usually pay him pretty well for this sort of thing. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, I hadn't even thought about paying you. I thought you were just doing this for free. So then we had to have a super awkward conversation about maybe putting some money in my hand. Yeah. And so he paid me a little bit. God bless his soul, but it wasn't very much.
Oh man. Yeah. Awkward.
So definitely just learning about how to speak to people about projects and things like that, and talk about money. And but I think a harder thing has just been the sort of the feast and famine of work when you're a freelancer. Projects come your way, and sometimes you feel like you have to take on a project even though you're not really passionate about it, but you just need the money because you got nothing else at the time. And then you realize it's pretty rubbish money anyway, but you feel like you still have to do it. And so you're doing this project, and I ended up having to sort of get into this mentality where I almost had to do some sort of little mind game with myself, where I was convincing myself that this was like the best thing I'd ever worked on, just so I didn't top myself during this project, because I'd just be sitting there going, oh my goodness, what am I doing with my life? I'm sitting here working on this project that I just detest, and I'm getting paid less than a McDonald's employee. And so I just had to play a little mind game with myself to actually convince myself that this was the best thing I'd ever done, and just trick myself into enjoying it almost, which actually kind of worked sometimes, believe it or not. But yeah, so there was definitely some times where I just kind of went, what am I doing with my life? How did I get here? And then there've been other times where I've just had great projects come across my desk, and worked with some wonderful people on some wonderful things that, I feel like have eternal value, and have blessed a lot of people. So yeah, you take the good with the bad, don't you?
Yeah.
How about yourself?
It's a challenge. Well, one thing that I think that I never anticipated, try to think of like when I was thinking what freelance work would be like, is the impact it has emotionally on me. Like because I've worked, for companies, and then for myself as a freelancer, and when you're working for a bigger company, it's like, I just want to get done with this so I can go home and work on my own stuff, because that's where my heart is. Sure. And you just sort of imagine like, well, what if I could just do that, full time, and then that would be perfect and be amazing. And so one thing that I just did not ever anticipate is that when I did end up working for myself and freelancing, is that there is an emotional thing that comes with it, where it's like, when I have a day job that's, even if it's an artistic day job, I leave that job and I'm done. It's my time. I have time off, and so I can do whatever I want with it. But whatever it is, I'm done with that job. So there's time off. But when I'm freelancing, it's like I never really have that time off. It's like emotionally, I'm always engaged in like I'm at work. Even when I'm not at work, I'm at work. And so there's 100%. There's no downtime, I think is the way I described it. And so I definitely would want to let people know, if anyone is not, is considering freelance and not in that mode yet, to really think about like work-life separation, because you kind of have to do it artificially yourself. Yeah. You have to say, work ends here and then I have free time, because otherwise it just never ends. It just sort of bleeds into everything. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's just one thing that
oh man, 100%. I became notorious for stealing time from my family, I'm ashamed to say, because, you know, I was always hitting deadlines and always feeling like I had to do more, you know, and so definitely that, yeah, I feel like we could both speak to anyone who wants a freelance career and just warn them that finding that balance between your family life and your friends and your work and then your own projects is just, it's like spinning wobbly plates. Hey.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. Yeah. Well, so let's change directions a little bit.
Sure.
How about we talk about your process, like your artistic process? Like how do you work? Like you know, how do you approach things?
Sure.
Is there anything unique about the way you approach it as well? Like, you know, is there anything that sticks out to you?
Unique, apart from the mind games I play with myself in my head while I'm working.
Right.
I would actually love to know if anyone else does that, by the way, whether I'm just completely weird. But process wise, well, I'm working on an illustration project at the moment called Godspace for some fantastic people that I work for. And also I'm working on a little animated series doing backgrounds. And so for both of those projects at the moment, I'm doing a little bit in Photoshop, but I'm mainly working in Clip Studio Paint. Oh. So I don't know if you've tried that one, but I love Photoshop, but there's things, I guess Clip Studio Paint, I hope I've got this right. It started out as Manga Studio and then it changed names and owners. And so I guess it was built from the ground up to be specifically for like drawing and painting digitally and creating comics and illustrations. Whereas if I've got my history right, I think Photoshop started out more as a photo editing thing, hence the name. And then people kind of realized they could draw with it. And so it's kind of evolved into other stuff. But yeah, so I just love working with Clip Studio Paint because I find some of the brushes just suit me better. And I actually find just the feel of drawing in that software. Yeah. I can't explain it, but I just like the feel of it better. And it's got some cool stuff where like you can actually, you know, import 3D figures and pose them around and stuff like that if you get stuck on a dynamic pose or whatever, or the shape of a hand. Like confession time, I really struggle with drawing hands well. And so quite often I'm like, you know, taking a photo of my hand with my phone and like importing that and using it for reference. And
need to.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Anyone out there who feels guilty for using reference, don't, because everyone does it.
Yeah.
Everyone. Yeah. Except idiots.
Yeah. Especially when you're on a deadline. It's like, go faster.
Yeah.
You don't have time.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah. So I actually love just drawing, you know, on paper with pencil, but for my actual work, I'm 100% digital at the moment, just because it's so much easier to change things and fix things. So I can't remember the last time I actually drew something on paper with a pencil. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah, like if you ever, I don't know if you've ever done the Inktober challenge where you actually go back and you use ink, you know, and it's like every year it's like, oh yeah, I'll use ink again, and it's like, oh yeah, I need to do this. It's something, somehow it feels like it's has a positive impact on my psyche, just to be like, you know, real paper, real ink, you know.
Yeah. I go back to that for my therapy, you know, for just when I don't have to do anything for anyone else. I definitely love getting back to that sort of stuff for sure. Yeah. But as far as the Samson Rise comic went, we made that almost entirely in Clip Studio Paint. Oh. And for the most part, I was using this little beast here, which is my Wacom mobile studio. Oh, just turned itself on, and there's Samson. So that's handy.
Oh, nice.
So that's one of the pages from the comic.
Yeah.
Someone's trying to sell me something there.
Very nice.
And you can see over here, these are the layers that we used. And so the cool thing about, so we just went nuts with the layers. Like there's probably 100 layers for that page.
Yeah.
Because I'm just adding dust and grit and lighting and shadows, and I'm doing it all on separate layers. And I know some people like sort of just, merging their layers all the time, so that they're just working on a few different layers. I'm not sure how you work with that, but like I get so paranoid that if I merge a layer, I'm going to stuff something up. So usually I've just got like dozens of layers happening, so I can just change everything at this little micro level.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Clip Studio seems to handle that pretty well, actually.
Oh, that's cool.
I hardly ever get lags with all my layering and stuff like that.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I usually run into lags pretty bad when I use layers. That too much, and
yeah, I've had some crashes.
Yeah.
That but yeah, the cool thing about Clip Studio as well, for anyone who's interested in using it for comic work, is that you've actually got this function where you can make a frame, like a panel, on your page, and then you can add layers inside that panel, so that everything you do inside that panel folder, it won't go out to any of the other panels or outside of the actual panel border. All those layers are contained within that panel border.
Oh,
so
cool.
It's a really handy little function. Yeah.
Huh.
And at any point you can actually change the shape of that panel, so it exposes more or less of the picture or whatever. So I don't think you can do that in Photoshop.
I don't know. I mean, you could do like a vector mask, I guess, but yeah, but I don't know. It's probably not as easy. Clip Studio does seem to have thought through the process from like a comic book artist's point of view more distinctly.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like I'm just doing a big ad for Clip Studio Paint now, but they've actually got this really cool perspective function too, where you can add a perspective layer, and you can choose either 1 or 2 or 3 point perspective, and it'll set it up for you. You can move it around to wherever you want to set up your grid, and then you can just start drawing in perspective, and it'll send your lines to your vanishing point automatically, which is brilliant.
Yeah,
it's saved me hours and hours and hours of work. So
yeah, that sounds.
There's a hot tip to anyone who hates doing perspective but knows that it's necessary.
Yeah.
Use the Clip Studio Paint perspective tool.
Yeah. Hey, that's cool. I didn't know about that. I should try it.
Yeah. Totally. Very nice. And it's not a very expensive piece of software to buy, and you don't have to buy it on subscription, because you just buy it and then you own it, which is flipping awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Like, yeah, man. Photoshop, I use it so much. I continue to use it more often than I do Clip Studio, but the subscription part just angers me. It's like, it's so frustrating.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty easy to cross over. I mean, I've still got Photoshop and I still use it, but I feel like Clip Studio Paint should be paying me some sort of
right
fee now, because I've been talking about so much.
Yeah. Well, hey, at least they know it's honest, right? There's no deal here.
I get no kickbacks, unfortunately.
Yeah, I should. So let's talk about your faith, like in terms of like the creative process. The challenges of being a creative person are difficult on their own, and then you add the dimension of faith to that, and in some ways I imagine it could make certain areas easier, certain areas harder. Have you does anything stick out to you in your creative journey as something that your faith either contributed to in terms of making it easier, or maybe making it more challenging than you otherwise would have been?
Yeah, okay. I think as far as my faith goes, it definitely drives a lot, if not everything that I do. Not everything, a lot. So a lot of the projects that I've taken on that I've really enjoyed have been faith-based projects, and I think I've generally sought out those sort of projects as well. I don't think I've ever been really interested in going for the big money projects, unless it's something that I believe has value. Like, I've never really been interested in doing really commercial stuff that's just selling stuff to the masses that they don't really want or need. I've always wanted to kind of do something that I feel is actually putting positivity and meaning out into the audience. And so I think God sort of knows where my heart is, and so I feel like he's brought a lot of projects to my desk that he knows that I would find value in. Pretty early on in my career, my friend Phil Watson got me a project with the Australian Bible Society, and that was probably the first project that I actually really enjoyed as a freelancer, and that was way back in 2006, I think, maybe 2007, and since then I've done various projects for them, but my favorite one has been for the last 14 years I've been doing their kids calendar for them every year. Which means I just get to draw Bible pictures, and so I've really enjoyed that. And it was only really last year that one of the editors on it told me that calendar also goes over to South Africa, and there's a whole big thing over there where they really enjoy having competitions as to who can memorize the most memory verses and things like that in the calendar. And they get rewarded for who can memorize scripture and things like that, and all those verses are in the calendar that we produce. And so I was absolutely stoked to learn that. That just something that I've really enjoyed doing is adding value to those children's lives, and they really enjoy it. So yeah, projects like that. And as far as like any sort of hardship or anything related to my faith, I don't really feel like anything too difficult to come up, apart from the odd troll that wants to get on your socials and bag you out for being a Christian and for being deluded and stuff like that, which is not very nice, but you go have a cry in your pillow and then you get over it. So yeah, I don't feel like I'm a persecuted Christian by any means, like compared to some people who really suffer for their faith. I definitely can't put myself in that basket. I think people in my circles have been quite accepting and respectful.
Cool. Praise the Lord for that. So I guess another kind of another question to ask would be like, as you have been pursuing creativity, and have you adopted any rules for yourself around that are affected by your faith in terms of how you approach your creativity or how you won't approach your creativity?
Rules for myself. Well, I mean, I guess that goes back to I definitely am not interested in doing stuff that I don't feel has value. And well, I think so. I think I can relate that to my personal work. I mean, when I'm not doing projects for other people, I like to create artworks that are more sort of fine art, that people might like to have on their walls. And whether it's a landscape or whether it's something more personal than that, I always try and put some sort of something that relates back to the creator, or just why we're here on earth, and some sort of positivity into that. And yeah, I guess I don't know if I've made a rule to kind of do that per se, but I feel like it's almost an unspoken rule that I have with myself, that I'm not interested in really doing artwork that is negative or too dark, And I know that there's a lot of Christians that enjoy doing more dark art and things like that. And I don't feel like I'm sort of in a position to speak to that at all. But for me, it's just I have to do something positive, that's going to actually uplift people when they see it. So I think that's my unspoken rule. And if not uplift them, then at least make them think,
Yeah.
make them question.
Yeah. One of the speakers that I like a lot, he says like he engages in like discussions with people, and he says his aim is to just put a stone in their shoe. So when they walk away a little bit different, and it's like, hey, I like that.
Yeah, they're walking weird.
Yeah. So I'll have to think about it. So I like
that's
that.
cool. Yeah. Well, and another friend of mine actually was preaching one time, and he was talking about peppering your conversation, and it was a great talk, and it stuck with me ever since, just about how you don't have to go into any conversations guns blazing or with an agenda or anything like that. You just kind of you pepper your conversation with who you are, and your faith should be who you are, part of who you are. And so you shouldn't be hesitant not to include that in your conversation, without actually having it on your agenda. Like, oh, okay, I've got to make sure that I somehow sideways slide Jesus or God into this conversation that I'm having with this person or something, like you just be yourself, just be authentic, and just, but don't hesitate if the moment's there.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like in terms of doing your work, you're saying that, does that sort of reflect in the way you approach your creative work as well?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, yeah, what's an example? Well, so I recently did a portrait of a friend last year to enter into an art prize, and it was just a charcoal portrait. And it was, it was at the time when COVID was freaking everybody out, and then you had a lot of rioting happening in Western countries like Australia and America. Just people taking to the streets and causing, havoc, and just responding to the world in very angry, very negative ways, and there was a lot of questioning going on, as to what's happening to the world and stuff. And I just wanted to do this portrait of my friend as in a very peaceful pose, just holding his Bible in his hand, reading the word, basically representing seeking answers from God, not from the world, and responding in a peaceful way to the chaos. And so I just did this black and white portrait of him in charcoal and entered it into this art prize, and it got in. So it was part of the 50 works that got in. And so now it's sort of on its way around Australia. I actually have no idea where the exhibition is at the moment, but it's going around to different regional galleries and things like that. And I've had just responses from people that have seen it and contacted me and just said that they really resonated with it. And there's a little Bible verse sort of hidden in there as well that some people have spotted. I can't remember exactly what one it is now, but it's talking about peace I give you. I can't remember the exact verse, but so I've completely lost track of what the question was, but that was just an example of
that was just how do your faith shows up in your art, I guess. And so that was a good example. Yeah
there we go.
So we're coming down to the end of our time here. So I'm curious if you have any. What was that?
That's gone quick.
Yeah, it is really. Good conversation. So if you let's talk about things like misconceptions or myths that you've run into about being an artist, or being an artist and a Christian. that you've run into that sort of stick out to you as something maybe worthy of comment? Like, have you run into myths or misconceptions that you had yourself that were like that you were you learned otherwise, or that other people have when they interact with you that you've seen?
Top question. I think as far as a misconception that I had was that it was going to be easier than it actually is to be a working artist, and that I was never going to not want to draw. And and now I'm sure you can relate to this. You get to the end of a working day, and the last thing you've got energy for, especially brain creative energy, is to pour some more passion into your own projects, that you've just been thinking about half the day. So that's definitely been something I've had to come to grips with, is that quite often there's sort of no time left for your own projects at the end of the day, or, and I've had to learn to prioritize family over my own projects, which I haven't always done. So, but I've gotten better at. I think other people sometimes, I've definitely had clients that have come to me and had the misconception that I can just whip something up in half an hour.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, thank you for thinking that I'm that awesome, but no, like, that's going to take me hours and hours. And so I don't know. It's been tricky sometimes to try and gracefully educate people as to how much things actually take to produce an artwork or several pieces of art, and that you're not just going to do it for the fun of it because you love doing art. Like, you actually need to make a living from it and things like that,
Right.
And so I don't know. I find that there's definitely been times over the years where I've had to have some awkward conversations with really nice people that just don't really understand, how difficult producing a piece of art can be. Yeah.
Do you have any like, without getting into too deep into the weeds, but do you have any tips for how to try to advocate for like reality when people have the wrong perception of, particularly it sounds like when you're dealing with clients? Do you have any tips that you think might be helpful to someone who might not know how to handle that?
Ooh, tips. I guess first of all, just always keep it cool, be polite, be professional. I don't know, because I guess sometimes it could be tempting to feel a bit offended or something, that someone doesn't really understand the value of what they're asking of you. I think the good analogy is always, if you can, if people can say this politely to the client, the analogy of, well, you wouldn't go to a doctor and say, can you fix me? I can't afford $80 for a 15-minute
Right.
doctor's appointment, so I'll offer you $15 instead, and expect the doctor to accept that. The doctor tells you his fee, and that's what you pay. And same as if you get an electrician to come and fix the electricals in your house. Electricals is a great word. You're not going to say, come and do it, and I've got $100 in my budget to pay you for that. And then I feel like it would be great if people would treat artists in the same way that they would treat other tradesmen, where they go, you've actually worked all your life to get good at this, and what you're offering is something of value. It's a service, and so you just name the price, and that's what will be paid. Because it is probably my least favorite thing of the job, having to barter as though I'm someone at a marketplace selling pawpaws or something like that. Like, No, I'm not going to lower my per kilo price or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. And it does make sense. Like it is, I think, helpful to think of it in terms of like a doctor is a good example. Because yeah, like if a doctor does a procedure very fast, we don't think, oh, well, that wasn't worth very much. But people tend to be like, oh, you can draw that in 2 seconds. So it's not, I shouldn't have to pay much. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's only a gift. You can only do that sort of thing because you've been training and spend all this other time learning the skill. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a challenge. Like very much recognize that. Oh, hey, we have a question. We have a questioner who says, how do you guys research and decide on the historical look of Samson's era for your book?
Well, I don't feel like we did a huge amount of research. Like, I've got books that I've just collected over the years that have, archaeological evidence of the times and things like that. And I also tend to collect other people's Bible art as well. So I've got quite a few illustrated Bibles and things like that. And obviously not all of them depict things in the same way. So some people have done more of their research than other people have. As far as us, for Samson, we weren't going very heavily on historical accuracy. And part of that reason was because before we really got going, one of the ideas that we tossed up was actually doing a kind of alternate reality apocalyptic version, where it's more like Samson of the alternate dimension future. So kind of this wasteland landscape, and there would have been weapons that were kind of a bit more sci-fi and things like that. And then as we progressed, we just kind of like scrapped that idea and just went back to kind of doing it more biblically accurately. But if you pick up the comic book and read it, you'll notice that we haven't actually really done a lot of research as far as how things look. So we've kind of just gone for a general style, and I think I'll leave it up to the reader to decide whether we've gotten close to what's accurate or not. But we didn't try too hard to get it exact.
Yeah, that's something I've always run into. Like I want to, whenever I've been given the opportunity to work on a Bible project, it's like, oh man, I want to do that, but I also the degree of research that I would want to do in order to do it is pretty significant. So then it's like, I don't know if I want to do that. So I often pass on that. But yeah, it occurs to me that there's a lot of choices being made, and whenever you're working on a piece, you can choose to indicate a lot about the environment or not much, right? And you can use more shapes and silhouettes and things like that to kind of give the sense of the landscape rather than like every little detail of every house and all that stuff. And so yeah, it seems to me like I haven't really been thinking that much about it, but it seems like there's a sort of a sliding scale of how much you have to do depending on what you choose to put on the page, right?
So. Totally, yeah. And actually one of the projects I'm working on at the moment, which is not a comic book project, but it's called God Space, and it's a curriculum for people who teach scripture in schools and Sunday school and things like that. And so my boss is great because she sends me information a lot of the time about like historical accuracy. So I'm actually learning a lot through this project, and I feel like it's really improving the historical accuracy of my pictures. Like she'll send me information about how the Jordan River was at the time when Joshua and the Israelites were crossing it and things like that. So yeah, I feel like slowly I'm learning and getting better with my accuracy depicting these events. But definitely starting out, and not saying this was a good thing, but starting out, I definitely wasn't too concerned about it. I was probably putting palm trees where there should have been olive trees and things like that. But I'm getting better at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I probably would have done the same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're pretty much out of time. Is there anything before we go that sticks out to you that you want to include? Is there anything else you want to share?
I will just mention actually that about 10 years ago, I did this Story of Jesus comic for the Bible Society in Australia. So it's 10 years old. So I feel like, and I didn't have Daz helping me with that one. So I feel like the art's not as good as Samson, but it's still a comic retelling of the story of Jesus, very accurately based on the book of Luke. I'm just in talks with Terminus Media at the moment, how we can get that out to a more international audience, because at the moment it's only been really published in Australia. So if the audience, if the people watching at the moment or listening are interested in that comic, then keep your eyes peeled for that coming up in the future. And also on November the 21st, gee, I hope I've got that right. Terminus is hosting a comic event with myself and Daryl and some even more important comic book artists like Sergio Cariello, who did the Action Bible, Barry Cook, who is a director and has done some amazing stuff with Disney and also some other projects. So we're just going to have a bit of a chit chat about the industry and have some good yarns and stuff, and people can get in on that. So that's check out the Terminus Media page for more information on that. But that's coming up November 21st.
Excellent, awesome,
should be good.
Right. Yeah, sounds good. And if people wanted to follow you or your work online, where should they go?
Oh, yeah, okay. I've got my Instagram, which is at MattyBake. And there's also my more fine art Instagram, which is at Matt Baker Fine Art. And Facebook, just MJ Baker Art Studio. Yeah, find me there.
Great. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Matt. It's been a really fun conversation. It went really fast, right?
I feel like we could keep talking. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, totally.
Good. I feel like I want to ask you more questions about what you do. Get enough time in there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. So all right, cool. Well, anybody who's interested in the books we talked about, like Terminus Media website is where you can find those books. And if you have any other questions, you can put them in the comments and we will try to respond there as well. And we also will have next week on Thursday, we'll have Baron Bell will be with us, and we'll be talking about more Terminus Media stuff. That's coincidental. I didn't plan it that way, but it just happened. So, and we'll be talking about his Dominion book. So you can join us then. We'll be at 6 o'clock on Thursday next week. So thank you everyone for joining us, and everybody have a wonderful week.